Lieutenant Commander Allison Wright stood at the viewing port of the UEA Pathfinder, staring at the massive structure floating in the darkness of space. The ancient station sat silently against the backdrop of stars, its metal surface etched, with symbols no human had ever seen before. Allison had been in the Space Force for 12 years, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this. "What do you think, Wright?" Captain Daniel Hayes asked as he joined her. His weathered face showed the same mix of wonder and worry that Allison felt. "It's older than our entire civilization, sir," she replied, her eyes never leaving the station. "Carbon dating from the outer hull suggests it's been here for at least 3 million years. That's impossible by everything we know." The Pathfinder had been charting the edge of the Orion arm when their sensors detected the structure. What began as a routine exploration mission had quickly become the most significant discovery in human history. Captain Hayes nodded. "Well, we're going inside. Suit up. You're on the team." 3 hours later, Allison floated through the silent corridors of the station alongside Hayes, Dr. Samantha Reeves, and 4 security officers. Their flashlights cut through darkness that hadn't been disturbed for eons. The air inside was breathable, another impossibility that Dr. Reeves couldn't explain. "The architecture," Samantha whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's designed for beings our exact size and shape." Allison had noticed it too. The doorways, the control panels sat at perfect human height. Everything suggested the station had been built by people just like them. But that couldn't be right. Humans hadn't even evolved 3 million years ago. "Captain, you should see this," called Sergeant Richard Powell from further down the corridor. They followed his voice to a vast chamber that stretched farther than their lights could reach. As they entered, motion sensors activated, and soft, blue lighting slowly illuminated the space from floor to ceiling. "My God," Hayes breathed. Thousands of transparent pods lined the walls, stacked 10 high and extending into the distance. Inside each pod was a human figure, perfectly preserved in what appeared to be suspended animation. Men and women of various ethnicities, all dressed in simple gray garments, all seemingly asleep. Samantha approached the nearest pod, her scanner whirring. "They're alive," she said, her voice shaking. "Minimal life signs, but definitely alive. And their DNA." She frowned at her readings, then scanned again. "This can't be right." "What is it?" Allison asked, moving closer. "They're human. Completely human. But there are differences. Genetic structures I've never seen before. It's like..." Samantha struggled to find the words. "It's like they're more complete than us. Like our DNA is a simplified version of theirs." Over the next 3 days, the crew of the Pathfinder documented their findings and waited for instructions from Earth Command. The station contained approximately 50,000 stasis pods. Computer systems remained operational after millions of years. And most disturbing of all, Samantha's analysis suggested that these beings weren't aliens who resembled humans. They appeared to be the original template, from which modern humans had somehow been derived. On the 4th day, Earth Command sent their orders. "Wake one of them up." "This is a mistake," Allison told Hayes privately as they prepared the revival procedure for a pod containing a tall male figure. "We know nothing about them. What if they're dangerous?" Hayes rubbed his tired eyes. "Those are our orders, right?" Besides, Samantha's team selected this subject specifically because his brainwave patterns suggested a calmer temperament. Whatever that means after 3 million years of sleep. The revival process took 6 hours. Samantha monitored every step while Allison and 8 armed security officers stood ready. Captain Hayes watched from behind a temporary barrier they had erected. When the pod finally opened with a soft hiss, the room fell completely silent. The man inside didn't move at first. Then his chest rose with a deep breath and his eyes opened, eyes of such a vivid blue that they seemed to glow in the dim light. He sat up slowly, his movements fluid and precise. He looked around at the humans watching him, his expression curious but unafraid. Then, to everyone's shock, he spoke in perfect English. "You found us sooner than expected." The security team raised their weapons, but the man showed no concern. He simply looked at them with mild interest. How How do you speak our language? Samantha finally asked. The man, who later told them his name was Nathaniel, smiled, slightly. I speak all your languages. They are derived from our original communication systems. Over the next 2 days, Nathaniel answered their questions with unsettling patience. He explained that he and the others in stasis were not aliens but humans, the original humans, before they had deliberately altered their own species. We changed you, he told them as they sat in what had become an improvised meeting room. We removed certain aspects of ourselves to create you. A more peaceful version, a fresh start. Why would you do that? Allison asked. She had been present for all the interviews, her suspicion never fully fading. Nathaniel looked at her with those 2 blue eyes. Because what we are nearly destroyed, everything. We are difficult beings. War is in our nature in ways you cannot comprehend. We hoped you would find a different path. Captain Hayes leaned forward. And what are you exactly? Your ancestors called us many things, gods mostly. Nathaniel's expression remained calm, but something ancient stirred behind his eyes. Gods of war, gods of thunder, gods of death. All misconceptions, but understandable ones from primitive perspectives. Samantha had requested permission to wake 4 more of the sleepers. Unlike Nathaniel, who looked mostly like an ordinary human apart from strange markings on his skin, the others showed more obvious differences. Unusual eye colors, slightly, different proportions, skin with a faint metallic sheen. They called themselves Elijah, Olivia, Mason, and Grace. All spoke English and multiple other human languages. All watched modern humans with the benevolent interest of adults observing children. It was during the 7th day of their contact that the long-range sensors of the Pathfinder detected the incoming vessels. At first, they thought it might be reinforcements from Earth, but the signatures didn't match any human technology. 63 ships, reported Communications Officer Leo Jenkins. Largest one measures approximately 8 kilometers long. They're on direct approach from the Cygnus sector. Captain Hayes turned to Nathaniel, who had been allowed on the bridge to observe. Are they friends of yours? Nathaniel's expression darkened. No. Those would be the Kelric, one of the races we created long ago. He exchanged glances with Elijah. They appear to have evolved significantly since we went into stasis. Created? Allison repeated, but before Nathaniel could answer, Officer Jenkins called out again. Captain, they're transmitting universal frequencies. The main screen flickered, revealing a humanoid figure with gray-purple skin and eyes that seemed too large for its elongated face. When it spoke, the translation systems converted its clicking speech to English. Humans of Earth. You have awakened the precursors. This action cannot be permitted. Surrender the war gods to us immediately, or your world will be cleansed. You have 12 hours to comply. The screen went dark. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at Nathaniel and the other awakened beings. War gods, Captain Hayes asked quietly. Nathaniel's eyes had begun to glow more intensely, and the markings on his skin shifted like living things. They remember us, he said. After all this time, they still fear us. Should they? Allison asked. Nathaniel looked at her, and for a moment his human appearance seemed to flicker, revealing something else beneath. Something ancient and terrible. Yes, he said simply. They should. The emergency meeting on the Pathfinder was tense. Captain Hayes looked around the table at his officers, the 5 awakened beings, and the video feed from Earth Command. Admiral Frank Porter's face on the screen showed no emotion, but his voice was grave. Let me understand this clearly, Porter said. These aliens, the Kelric, are demanding we hand over our guests, and if we refuse, they'll attack Earth? That is correct, Nathaniel replied calmly. The Kelric were one of several species we engineered as workers long ago. They evolved beyond our expectations. Dr. Samantha Reeves leaned forward. Admiral, my research confirms what Nathaniel has told us. Their DNA contains markers that couldn't have evolved naturally. They are genetically enhanced humans, and modern humans appear to be, well, a version of them with certain traits removed. Admiral, Porter's expression hardened. And what traits would those be? Nathaniel answered before Samantha could speak. The traits that made us effective warriors, the ability to access our full genetic potential in combat situations, what your ancestors might have called berserker rage, though it is far more controlled than that term suggests. Lieutenant Commander Allison Wright watched Nathaniel carefully. In the week she had known him, he had been unfailingly polite, even gentle. It was hard to imagine him as a war god. We have 11 hours before the Kelric expect our answer, Captain Hayes reminded everyone. We need a plan. The meeting lasted 3 more hours. Earth Command was divided. Some wanted to surrender the 5 awakened beings to protect Earth. Others argued that the technology on the ancient station could help defend humanity against the Kelric threat. Olivia, one of the awakened females, finally spoke up. There is another option. Wake more of us. The room fell silent. Allison felt a chill run down her spine. How many more? Admiral Porter asked. Enough, Elijah said, his golden eyes gleaming. Enough to remind the Kelric why they feared us. Before any decision could be made, the Kelric attacked. Not Earth, but Mars colony. The settlement of 50,000 people had minimal defenses. The Kelric ships descended without warning, their weapons reducing habitats to rubble. On the Pathfinder's bridge, they watched the live feed from Mars in horror. Thousands died in the first minutes. Captain Hayes slammed his fist on the console. They said 12 hours, we still had time. Nathaniel stood perfectly still, watching the destruction. They never intended to wait. This is a message. The 5 awakened beings looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Then Nathaniel turned to Captain Hayes. We need to return to the station immediately. All of us. Admiral. Porter's voice came through the speakers. Captain Hayes, you are ordered to bring the Pathfinder back to Earth defense perimeter. Hayes looked at the continuing feed from Mars, then at Nathaniel. With respect, Admiral, I believe our best chance lies with them. He cut the transmission before Porter could respond. Set course for the station, maximum speed. 4 hours later, Allison stood with Samantha and Captain Hayes in the central chamber of the ancient station. Nathaniel and the others had led them to a hidden control room deep within the structure. The walls were covered with symbols that shifted and changed as they watched. What is this place? Samantha asked, her scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming her fear. The Awakening Chamber, Mason replied. He was the youngest looking of the 5, though Allison knew age meant nothing to these beings. From here, we can activate specific sectors of the station. Nathaniel placed his hand on a central panel. The symbols flowed around his fingers like liquid light. I am initiating the Thanatos Protocol. What does that mean? Hayes asked. It means we are going to war, Grace answered. Her skin had taken on a slight metallic sheen, the first visible sign of the changes they had described. We will wake the warriors first. Deep within the station, thousands of stasis pods began to activate. Allison watched on the monitoring screens as men and women awakened from a sleep that had lasted millions of years. Unlike the gentle awakening of Nathaniel and the others, these revivals were almost instantaneous. The sleeper's eyes opened, already alert, already understanding what was happening. How do they know? Allison asked. You haven't told them anything. The Thanatos Protocol includes a battlefield update to all awakened warriors, Elijah explained. They know everything that has happened since we woke. They know about the Kelric attack on Mars. Within 6 hours, 1,000 awakened warriors had gathered in the station's enormous assembly hall. Allison stood with Hayes and Samantha on a viewing platform, watching the sea of ancient humans below. They looked ordinary at first glance, but there was something about the way they moved, something predatory and efficient that made them seem profoundly different from modern humans. Nathaniel addressed them in a language Allison didn't recognize, a flowing musical tongue that nonetheless carried undertones of command and power. The assembled warriors listened silently, then responded with a single word, spoken in unison. The sound of it made Allison's skin crawl. What did they say? Hayes asked when Nathaniel joined them. They said, "Vengeance," Nathaniel translated. "It loses something in your language. The concept includes protection of the innocent and punishment of those who break sacred laws." Allison looked at the warriors again. "And what happens now?" "Now we show the Kelric why awakening the war gods was their greatest mistake," Olivia said. "The first Kelric warship to reach Earth orbit was massive, a dreadnought 8 kilometers, long with enough firepower to devastate a continent. Earth's defense fleet moved to intercept it, but their weapons barely scratched its hull. From the Pathfinder, now stationed near the moon as part of Earth's defensive line, Allison watched the tactical displays with growing dread. The Kelric ship was launching attack craft by the hundreds. Then a small transport appeared seemingly from nowhere. It was one of the ancient station's shuttles, carrying 30 of the awakened warriors. It didn't fire weapons or deploy fighters. It simply approached the Kelric dreadnought and attached itself to the hull. "What are they doing?" Admiral Porter demanded over the comm. "One shuttle against that monster?" For 15 minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Then explosions began to bloom across the surface of the Kelric ship. Not random detonations, but precise strategic strikes against engines, weapon systems, and control centers. "They're inside," Nathaniel said from behind Allison. 30 warriors. That's all it takes. Within an hour, the Kelric dreadnought was drifting, powerless and broken. No distress calls, no surrender, just silence. "What happened to the crew?" Hayes asked quietly. Nathaniel's eyes had taken on that eerie glow again. "There were 20,000 Kelric on that ship. There are none now." The implications of what he'd said hung in the air. 20,000 aliens killed by 30 warriors in less than an hour. The war gods had returned, and their fury was absolute. Another Kelric fleet appeared at the edge of the solar system, larger than the first. Hundreds of ships. Nathaniel looked at the tactical display and nodded. "Wake them all," he said to someone over his communicator. "Wake all the sleepers." Major Vincent Russell moved quickly through the ruins of Chicago Dome, signaling his Marines to follow. The glass and metal structure that had once protected the city from harsh weather now hung in broken shards overhead. Smoke filled the air, where Kelric bombing runs had hit civilian areas. "How much further to the evacuation point?" asked Private Lisa Martinez, helping an elderly man walk over the rubble. 6 blocks, Vincent replied, checking his map. His squad was responsible for getting these 50 civilians to the underground transport station. From there, they would head to the Rocky Mountain complex, one of the few safe zones left. 3 weeks had passed since the Kelric Armada arrived. Despite the ancient warriors' initial success against the first dreadnought, the aliens had adjusted their tactics. They landed ground forces in major cities using civilians as shields against orbital strikes from the awakened warriors' ships. Vincent's radio crackled. "All units, be advised. Kelric shock troops spotted in Sector 7, moving toward downtown. Estimated 200 hostiles." Vincent swore under his breath. Sector 7 was between his group and the evacuation point. His 20 Marines were skilled, but they couldn't face 200 Kelric soldiers while protecting civilians. "We need to find another route," he told his second-in-command, Sergeant Neil Dawson. Before Neil could respond, the ground shook. 6 Kelric assault vehicles rounded the corner ahead, their hover engines humming. Behind them marched at least 50 alien soldiers in heavy armor. Their weapons were already raised. "Take cover," Vincent shouted, pushing civilians behind a collapsed wall. His Marines spread out, taking defensive positions, but Vincent knew it was hopeless. The Kelric had superior weapons and armor. This was a fight they couldn't win. Then a single figure walked past him, moving calmly toward the Kelric forces. It was a woman, dressed in simple gray clothing. She wore no armor and carried no visible weapons. Her brown hair was tied back in a practical knot, and she moved with fluid grace. Vincent recognized her instantly from the briefings. Grace, one of the 5 original awakened beings. "Get back!" he yelled at her. "They'll tear you apart." Grace didn't even look at him. She continued walking toward the Kelric, who had now noticed her. The alien commander barked something in their clicking language, and all 50 soldiers aimed their weapons at the lone woman. "We need to help her," Martinez said, raising her rifle. Wait, Vincent ordered, something in Grace's confident walk making him hesitate. The Kelric commander shouted again. Grace stopped, standing about 30 meters from the alien forces. Then, to Vincent's shock, she smiled and said something in the Kelric language. Whatever she said made the commander laugh, a harsh, grating sound. What happened next occurred so quickly that Vincent's brain could barely process it. One moment Grace was standing still. The next, she was among the Kelric soldiers. Her form blurred with speed. Her skin had taken on a metallic sheen that deflected energy blasts. Her hands moved with impossible precision, striking vital points that Vincent couldn't even see. The first 10 Kelric fell before the others could even react. When they did fire their weapons, Grace was already elsewhere, moving through their formation like water through cracks. Where she touched, aliens fell. Some tried to flee. None escaped. In less than a minute, 40 alien soldiers lay dead or dying. The commander fired a high-powered energy cannon at Grace. The blast hit her directly in the chest. She staggered back 2 steps, then looked down at the smoking hole in her clothing. The skin beneath was unmarked, the metallic sheen now glowing slightly. The commander didn't get to fire again. Grace covered the distance between them in a heartbeat, her hand striking through the alien's armored chest plate as if it were paper. The assault vehicles tried to retreat. Grace picked up a fallen Kelric weapon and fired 5 precise shots. Each one found a critical system, and the vehicles crashed to the ground. Then silence fell. Grace stood among the fallen enemies, her body gradually returning to its human appearance. The whole encounter had lasted less than 2 minutes. Vincent approached her cautiously, his Marines and the civilians watching in stunned silence. "Thank you," he said, not knowing what else to say to a being who had just killed 50 elite alien soldiers single-handedly. Grace turned to him, her eyes still glowing faintly. "You fight well for children," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "But this is not your war, it never was." She gestured toward a different street. "Take that route to your evacuation point. It's clear of enemies. I've made sure of it." Before Vincent could respond, she was gone, moving at that impossible speed toward another part of the city. Meanwhile, on the UEA Pathfinder, Lieutenant Commander Allison Wright worked with Mason in what had become a joint human precursor command center. Screens showed battles happening across the solar system. Earth's military forces worked alongside the awakened warriors, but it was clear who was doing the real fighting. "I don't understand why they hate you so much," Allison said, watching footage of a Kelric cruiser being torn apart by what appeared to be just 5 precursor fighters. "Enough to risk their entire civilization to destroy you." Mason looked up from the console where he was coordinating defense strategies. His eyes were that unnatural blue that all the Awakened shared when they were using their enhanced abilities. "We created them," he said simply. "The Kelric, the Vorn, the Talic, and the Meridian. 4 species engineered to serve different functions in our empire." "You mean they were slaves?" Allison said. Mason considered this. "We didn't see it that way at the time. We made them, improved them, gave them purpose. But yes, by your standards, they were slaves. Very capable slaves who eventually rebelled." Allison studied the tactical displays. "And they think you've woken up to reclaim your empire?" "Haven't we?" Mason asked, his voice neutral. The question hung in the air between them. Allison had seen enough in the past weeks to understand what the precursors were capable of. 1 million of them had now awakened from the ancient station. Their ships, constructed from technology humanity could barely comprehend, had pushed the Kelric back from Earth orbit. But what would happen after the war? Would these beings who called themselves humanity's ancestors simply go back to sleep? Or would they reclaim the galaxy they once ruled? On a screen nearby, Admiral Keith Bennett was in a heated discussion with Nathaniel about strategy. The contrast was striking. The Admiral, a decorated military leader with 40 years of experience, deferring to the judgment of a being who looked human but clearly wasn't. "You never answered my question," Allison said to Mason. "Are they wrong to fear you'll rebuild your empire?" Mason was silent for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he said, Some of us believe it's our right. Others remember why we chose to sleep in the first place. He looked at Allison directly. The war isn't over yet, and what comes after will depend on which side of our nature prevails. In Chicago, Vincent Russell's team successfully delivered their civilians to the evacuation point. As they prepared to head back out for another rescue mission, Vincent received new orders. He and his Marines were being reassigned to work directly with the precursors. They're calling it the Human Precursor Joint Combat Initiative, his commanding officer explained over the secure channel. After what happened today, they want Marines who've seen them in action. Vincent thought about Grace, about the terrifying efficiency with which she had eliminated 50 elite alien warriors. "Sir?" he asked. "What exactly are we supposed to do? We can't fight like they can." The answer came back immediately. "We're not there to fight like them, Major. We're there to remind them what they're fighting for." 8 months into the war, Earth had changed. The blue and green planet now hosted vast structures built by the precursors. Shining cities rose on Mars where only research stations had stood before. The moons of Jupiter housed shipyards where vessels of impossible design took shape under the hands of the awakened warriors. Dr. Samantha Reeves looked out the window of her office in the New Geneva complex. As the head of the Human Precursor Relations Committee, she had the difficult job of building bridges between modern humans and their ancient ancestors. It wasn't going well. "They don't see us as equals," she told her assistant Alan Morris. "They're polite about it, but they view us as simplified versions of themselves, children who need guidance." Alan nodded, passing her the latest report. 2 million of them awake now, and they've established bases on Mars, Europa, and Titan. The military is concerned about their independence. Samantha understood the worry. The precursors fought alongside humans against the Kelric, but they didn't truly answer to Earth's governments. They followed Nathaniel and the original 5 awakened, and no one was quite sure what their plans were once the war ended. A light flashed on Samantha's desk, indicating a visitor. The door slid open, and Olivia entered. Of the 5 original precursors, she was the most sympathetic to modern humans. Her golden brown skin had a subtle glow today, suggesting she had recently been in combat form. "The Kelric have requested peace talks," Olivia announced without preamble. Samantha sat up straight. "That's unexpected. They've been losing ground, but they still control most of their territory." "They fear what comes next," Olivia said, taking a seat across from Samantha. "They remember stories of what happened the last time they faced the full might of the awakened." "And what did happen?" Alan asked boldly. Olivia's expression grew distant. "We nearly wiped them out, along with the other 3 servant races who rebelled. It was not our proudest moment. The peace talks were scheduled for the neutral ground of Ceres Base. Representatives from Earth governments would attend, but everyone knew the real negotiations would be between the precursors and the Kelric. Modern humans were spectators in a conflict between ancient powers. Captain Daniel Hayes, now commanding the precursor-enhanced battleship Defiance, received different news that same day. His ship had been patrolling the outer system when the sensors detected unusual energy readings from the Kuiper Belt. "It's not a natural phenomenon," reported his science officer, Lieutenant Kate Ward. "The energy signature matches Kelric technology, but it's massive, far bigger than anything we've encountered so far." Hayes studied the readings, then contacted Nathaniel, who had taken to working closely with the Defiance crew. When the precursor arrived on the bridge and saw the data, his normally calm expression changed. "We need to investigate this immediately," Nathaniel said, his voice tight. "This energy pattern is consistent with a stellar manipulation device." "In plain English?" Hayes asked. "A weapon that can trigger a supernova," Nathaniel replied. "If they can't defeat us directly, they may try to destroy your sun." The Defiance changed course, heading toward the distant energy signature. As they traveled, Nathaniel explained that such weapons had been theoretical even in the height of precursor civilization. The idea that the Kelric had developed one was troubling. "We removed certain knowledge from your ancestors when we created modern humans," Nathaniel told Hayes as they stood in the observation deck. "The capacity to build planet killers, star destroyers, Weapons too powerful for any species to wield responsibly. Including yourselves? Hayes asked. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Especially ourselves. We fought a civil war once, near the end of our reign. 3 star systems were destroyed. Trillions died. That's when many of us decided to sleep, to remove ourselves from a universe. We had damaged too much already. As the Defiance approached the source of the energy readings, they found an enormous Kelric construction. A ring-shaped device nearly 1,000 kilometers in diameter floated in the darkness of the outer system, with hundreds of ships around it. It's not complete, Nathaniel observed, studying the scans. But it soon will be. We have perhaps 2 days before they can activate it. Hayes gathered his officers. Options? We're outgunned, his tactical officer pointed out. There are at least 300 Kelric ships guarding that thing. Nathaniel's eyes had begun to glow with that eerie blue light. I've called for reinforcements, but they won't arrive in time. We need to strike now, with what we have. Which is 1 ship against 300, Hayes said. 1 ship and me, Nathaniel corrected. The plan was simple and desperate. The Defiance would launch a direct attack, drawing the attention of the Kelric fleet. While they were distracted, Nathaniel and a small team would approach the superweapon using a stealth shuttle and place quantum charges at key points. As they prepared for the mission, Hayes found himself in the armory with Nathaniel. The precursor was checking weapons with practiced efficiency. You know, Hayes said, in all these months I've never seen you fight. Not personally, the others yes, but not you. Nathaniel paused. There's a reason for that, Captain. The 5 of us who woke first were chosen because we had the most control. The others, they can maintain their human appearance with concentration. But when I fully embrace my combat form, I cannot. What does that mean? Nathaniel looked at Hayes, his eyes now glowing so brightly they cast shadows. It means I am about to show the Kelric why their ancestors called me the Devastator, why planets surrendered at the mention of my name, why even our own kind sometimes feared me. The battle began exactly as planned. The Defiance attacked the Kelric fleet, its enhanced weapons tearing through several enemy ships before they could respond. The distraction worked. Most of the Kelric vessels moved to engage the human ship, leaving the superweapon less defended. Nathaniel's shuttle slipped through the chaos, approaching the massive ring structure. The small team of 4 precursors and 2 human engineers landed on the outer surface. They had 30 minutes to place charges before the Kelric would detect them. 20 minutes in, everything went wrong. Alarms blared across the structure. Kelric security forces converged on their position. They found us too soon. One of the human engineers, Jack Rivera, reported to Hayes over their quantum link. We've placed most of the charges, but we're cut off from the last section. Then Jack's voice changed, becoming tight with awe and fear. Sir, Nathaniel is... He's changing. I've never seen anything like... The transmission cut off. On the Defiance, fighting for its life against dozens of Kelric warships, Hayes could only wait and hope. 15 minutes passed with no word from the team. Then 20. The Defiance's shields were failing. They couldn't hold out much longer. Suddenly, a series of explosions bloomed across the superweapon's surface. Not just at the planned points, but everywhere, as if something was tearing through the structure from within. Captain, his sensor officer called out. I'm detecting only 1 life sign from our team. It's moving at impossible speed through the structure. Before Hayes could respond, the entire superweapon began to break apart. The Kelric ships around it scattered in disarray. Then the quantum link reactivated, carrying Jack's voice once more. Captain, we're alive. 4 of us at least. Nathaniel got us out before... He paused. Sir, I saw him. What he really is. I understand now why ancient people worshipped them as gods. The shuttle appeared on sensors, racing back toward the Defiance as the superweapon collapsed behind it. Hayes ordered all weapons to clear a path for them through the remaining Kelric ships. When Nathaniel finally returned to the Defiance, he was back in human form. But Hayes saw something different in the crew's eyes when they looked at the precursor now. Not just respect or fear, but understanding. They had glimpsed what these beings truly were beneath their human appearance. And as reports came in that the Kelric had suddenly agreed to all terms of the peace talks, Hayes wondered if humanity was ready for the gods they had awakened. Admiral Keith Bennett stood at the center of the United Earth Alliance Council chamber. Large windows showed the rebuilt skyline of New Geneva, where precursor architecture now blended with human designs. 1 year had passed since the destruction of the Kelric superweapon, and 6 months since the peace treaty was signed. The precursors knew about the Kelric for centuries, Bennett explained to the assembled representatives. They monitored their development from stasis, using automated systems. They could have awakened at any time, but they chose to wait. Wait for what? Asked Counselor Patricia Lynn. For us to develop on our own, Bennett replied. Their records show they interfered only twice in human history, once to deflect an asteroid impact 10,000 years ago, and once to neutralize radiation from a solar flare in 1859. Otherwise, they let us grow independently. The council chamber buzzed with low conversation. For months, humans had debated what would happen now that the war was over. 2 million precursors walked among them, beings with godlike powers who viewed Earth as their creation. Many feared they would take control, benevolent perhaps, but rulers nonetheless. And now? Counselor Lynn pressed. What are their intentions? Bennett looked toward the back of the room, where Nathaniel stood quietly observing. Perhaps they should speak for themselves. Nathaniel walked forward, his movements fluid and precise as always. The room fell silent. Every human there had seen footage of what the precursors could do in battle. Everyone knew the stories. The Kelric have made an unusual demand during our final negotiations, Nathaniel began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. They ask that all precursors return to stasis as a condition of lasting peace. Surprised murmurs filled the room. Bennett had not expected this. And your response, he asked. We are inclined to agree, Nathaniel said simply, with conditions of our own. Earth will maintain guardianship of the stasis facility, and the former servant races will acknowledge human independence. More whispers spread through the chamber. It was the outcome few had predicted, that the war gods would choose to sleep again. Later that day, in the gardens of the New Geneva complex, Captain Allison Wright found Nathaniel looking out at the mountains. After a year serving as liaison between Earth military and the precursors, she had been promoted and given command of the Pathfinder, now rebuilt with precursor technology. Is it true? She asked without preamble. You're all going back to sleep? Nathaniel nodded. Most of us. Some have chosen a different path. Why? Allison had worked alongside these beings for a year. She had seen their power, their knowledge. You could rule the galaxy if you wanted. We did once, Nathaniel replied. It didn't end well for anyone. They walked through the garden in silence for a few moments. Spring flowers bloomed around them, their scent filling the air. There's something I need to show you, Nathaniel said finally. Something few humans have seen. He led her to a small transport, and they traveled to the ancient station where everything had begun. Much had changed there. The stasis chambers were being prepared again, but in a new section, Nathaniel showed her a laboratory unlike any Allison had seen before. Hundreds of precursors worked there, their bodies partially transformed into their combat forms, their skin glowing with subtle light. At the center stood Olivia, directing the work. What is this? Allison asked. A choice, Olivia answered, coming to join them. Some of us don't wish to sleep again, but we also don't wish to remain as we are, different, separate from modern humans. She gestured to the complex equipment. This process will gradually transform us. Our enhanced abilities will fade. Our genetic structure will simplify. Within 3 generations, our descendants will be indistinguishable from modern humans. Allison understood suddenly. You're choosing to become like us. Yes, Nathaniel confirmed. About 500 of us have made this choice. The rest will return to stasis. But why? Allison struggled to comprehend. Why give up what you are? Nathaniel's eyes, those unnaturally blue eyes, met hers directly. We are war, Allison. It's what we were engineered to be by those who came before us. We destroyed our creators when they lost control of us, then built an empire on bones. He looked around at the laboratory, where immortal warriors were choosing mortality. But in you, our modified descendants, we created something unique. Beings who could choose peace first yet still defend themselves when necessary. Olivia smiled gently. We want to see what you will build, without our interference, without our shadows hanging over you. 2 weeks later, Allison stood on the observation deck of what Earth governments now called Sentinel Point, the ancient station where it all began. Beside her, Captain Daniel Hayes watched the stasis systems activate one by one. On the level below them, Nathaniel and the majority of the awakened warriors prepared to enter suspended animation once more. Their combat forms had faded, leaving them looking almost human again. Do you think we'll ever need to wake them again? Hayes asked quietly. Allison considered the question. The peace with the Kelric seemed stable, but the galaxy was vast and largely unexplored. Who knew what other threats might emerge in the future? I hope not, she replied honestly. But if we do, the war gods will be waiting, Hayes finished, and heaven help whoever made them angry. In other parts of the solar system, the 500 precursors who had chosen to remain awake were already beginning their new lives. Some had established a colony on Europa, determined to forge their own path separate from both their sleeping kindred and Earth. Others had joined human settlements, beginning the long process of integration. And far beyond the edge of explored space, a small group, led by Elijah, had departed in ships of ancient design. Their mission was self-appointed, to stand guard at the boundaries, watching for threats that ancient records suggested might someday return. Dr. Samantha Reeves put the final touches on the official record of the Precursor Agreement, as it was now called. Her words would be studied by future generations who had never seen the war gods in their full power. They sleep again, she wrote, not because they must, but because they choose to give humanity space to grow. They dream of a future where their children have built something better than an empire of war, perhaps even something worthy of waking for. On Earth, in cities and towns and villages across the planet, humans looked up at the night sky with new understanding. The stars had always held mystery, but now they knew that among those distant points of light, their ancestors had once built wonders and terrors in equal measure. And if someday new threats emerged from the darkness between worlds, humanity would not stand alone. Deep within Sentinel Point, surrounded by powerful guardian systems, 2 million war gods slept. They were humanity's last defense, their ultimate weapons, their terrible guardian angels. They were the gods of war, and they had chosen peace.